Well, hey there, internet friends. I wanted to talk today about the movie Conclave and the dueling ideas of allegory versus application. I saw Conclave last week, twice actually, once with family and once with friends, and loved it. I think it might actually be my favorite movie of the year so far. And then since then, I went and read the entire book, which wasn't too hard. It's a pretty breezy read, but I really enjoyed it. Now that I've kind of grinded through that, I've been reading through some of the film criticism that has been written about the movie. And I will say, it's interesting. A lot of the reviews are quite positive, but many of them frame it as like this kind of funny caper about priests gossiping behind each other's backs. And there's an element of that for sure. But the thing that really stuck with me about it was that it's a quite earnest and thoughtful depiction of faith. I really resonated with the character of Ralph Fiennes as this dean of the College of Cardinals who has to manage the election of a new pope and has to kind of walk that line of trying to enact a process that is meant to be divine while also recognizing your own agency within it and your ability to kind of turn the tide of how things go. And then the added complication of the egos of all the men around you and hoping that that doesn't dilute this thing that's meant to be very deeply spiritual. I found it a really thoughtful exploration of these situations in life where you're trying to do the will of God and make this kind of profound good happen, but you don't know whether your role is to sort of enact that through your own devices or to step back and trust that the situation will play out the way it's supposed to. Add to that a lot of provocative meditations about the necessary link between faith, trust, and mystery. Thoughts about how man-made systems made to honor God can ultimately divorce themselves from the good, beautiful world that he created, and how the divine can work through those broken systems anyway. And you've kind of got a movie that's designed to push all my personal buttons. The interesting thing, though, is that a lot of the film criticism that I've read about Conclave has not touched on any of those topics whatsoever. The kind of common consensus take about the movie seems to be that it's an allegory for the US 2024 presidential election. Now, this makes a lot of sense. I felt it the first time I watched the movie as well. It's about a bunch of cardinals who have to cast their vote for the next pope, and there's more liberal popes and more conservative popes, and they're doing all these things to get the vote, and there's even a line at one point where Ralph Fiennes says, "Is this what we've been reduced to? Voting for the least worst person?" It's kind of ironic, though, because some people have insinuated that this movie was written and produced specifically to come out at this particular moment in American politics. But actually, it's based on a book which was published in 2016. It was written in the years prior to that. And having read the book now, I can say all the lines that feel very specific to 2024 are actually in the original book. Pretty much all the dialogue in the movie is word for word from that novel. That's not to mention the fact that the director was German, the crew was Italian, the cast was from all over the world, which leads me to the conclusion that while the film may have elements that are applicable to US politics, it is not a direct allegory for the presidential election. And I think this is an important distinction because in all the conversation that I've seen about the movie, I've seen a lot of people talking about how similar it is to our current social political state, some even calling it didactic on those grounds. But I've seen very few talking about what the movie is actually textually about. Conclave is not textually about the presidential election. It is about a character named Father Lawrence, who is the dean of a college of cardinals, tasked with managing the election of a new pope, and all of the backstabbing and controversy and strife that that election generates among his colleagues, who are trying to serve God, but also sometimes trying to serve themselves. For me, some of the chief value of the film comes from its insights about the state and future of the church in the world, the silencing and importance of women, the sequestering of clergy from day-to-day reality, the dueling ideas of tradition and progress which continually go head-to-head. And if these ideas seem relevant to other aspects of life, say the politics that are playing out on a global scale in various countries, that's worth examining. What does that say about the link between church and state and the way that both are run? I'm someone who loves to talk about movies through the lens of how they relate to current culture. That's a lot of the videos that I've made on this channel, and I think it can be a really helpful conversation to talk about the application of a given film in our current moment. When I first saw Conclave, I definitely noticed all the ways in which it paralleled our current moment and wanted to jump to writing some piece about what Conclave has to say about the US presidential election or whatever. But then I stopped myself because I think sometimes, as much as it can be helpful to talk about what a piece of art has to say about our current moment, it's also important to sit with the art itself and ask what it's trying to say within the context of the thing that it is, on the surface. Conclave's surface insights are primarily about faith and mystery and the purpose of the church in the world and the journey that this one character goes on. And it's important to feel that before you jump to a practical takeaway. I read a quote from Oscar Wilde recently where he said that all art is both surface and symbol. Those who read the symbol do so at their peril. Symbols can be good sometimes, and even allegory can be powerful. But I think before we jump to things like that, it's important to experience the work of art as it is, and to believe that sometimes the most straightforward interpretation can have just as much depth as what's supposedly buried beneath the surface. Anyway, it's just a thought. I'll see y'all soon.